somebody asked you, hey, who do you think the top allies of the United States are? You would probably mention countries such as Canada, the United Kingdom, Japan, Israel, and other first world countries scattered throughout the world. People would name the previously mentioned countries probably due to those countries sharing very similar principles or because they have close military ties with the United States. Most of them do have some degree of defense agreements with that of the United States, whether it's in the term of international organizations such as NATO, or just one-on-one agreements like the ones with Japan and South Korea. However, just because a country has a close military tie with the United States, that doesn't exactly mean that they're an ally. An example would be the country of Venezuela. Venezuela is part of the international defense agreement known as the Rio Pact, which is a NATO-like defense alliance between the United States and most of Latin America. Countries included such as Brazil, Argentina, and Colombia, and many more. Since Venezuela recently rejoined the alliance back in 2019, that does mean that the country does have a mutual defense pact with the United States. But today, Venezuela isn't exactly a US ally. In fact, it's more of the complete opposite, regardless of their defense agreement. So, what would be an example of a country that has extremely close ties with the United States, but has no military ties? Mexico! Mexico is one of the United States' top allies, and even holds a closer relationship than a vast majority of Western Europe itself, even if the two don't have much of a military-based relationship. This can be due to the two countries having similar government ideals, extremely large amounts of trade, and the fact that they are literally connected to one another. In recent years, we have seen increased tension under the Trump presidency due to the president's proposed crackdown on illegal immigration from Mexico. This has caused continuous back and forth between the two countries in recent years. So let's see if recent years have strained these two's relationship, or if it's more just a modern debate in today's episode of the U.S. Relations series, in which we'll go over the relationship between that of the United States of America and the North American country of Mexico. I do normally do this series in alphabetical order, and in a normal video pattern, the European country of Belarus was supposed to be next. But recently I have traveled to Cancun, Mexico, so I was like, let's just do Mexico next. I didn't really plan anything special to film while in Mexico for this video, but I do have a small number of pictures and videos that I can add at the end of this video. This will most likely be my longest video to date since there is a lot of complex history between these two countries. Honestly, the only countries I could think of that could rival Mexico in terms of video information are probably countries such as the United Kingdom, France, or Canada. Anyway, let's get back to the video and start with the two's history. The first signs of relations between the United States and Mexico was when Mexico was still under Spanish rule. Mexico was a part of a greater entity known as New Spain, and even helped militarily in the American War of Independence in 1776. The one aspect between U.S.-Spanish relations that would forever dictate the future relations with Mexico was the ownership of modern U.S. state of Texas. The U.S. insisted that Texas was included in the Louisiana Purchase and that itself was the rightful owner. The Spanish said something along the lines of, the western borders of Louisiana were never truly defined. Want to just take Florida instead? Sure, why not? 2 years later, in 1821, Mexico gained independence from Spain, and the U.S. recognized and established diplomatic relations with the country in December of 1822. The two countries signed the Adamonis Treaty, which established the two's borders. The U.S. did not, however, like this treaty at all, since it meant that Texas would remain under Mexico's control. Over the course of the next 20 years or so, the two countries have had constant meetings about the U.S. possibly purchasing Texas, New Mexico, and California from Mexico, which Mexico always declined. People would also frequently leave the U.S. and settle in the Texas region of Mexico instead. The settlers eventually found themselves at legal odds with the Mexican government due to Mexico's abolishment of slavery in 1829, which is the primary source of money to the settlers in Texas. This led to Texas revolting and going on its own Revolutionary War with Mexico. Texas declared itself as independent, although Mexico did not recognize it as such, while still declaring it part of Mexico. The United States eventually annexed Texas, which would lead to Mexico severing relations with the country and the Mexican-American War. The annexation of Texas has sparked many border clashes between the United States and Mexico, which prompted U.S. President at the time, James K. Polk, to encourage Congress to formally declare war on Mexico, which Congress did. The war ended up being disastrous for Mexico, with Mexico City being captured by the U.S. and suffering significantly more casualties. The war ended with a U.S. victory with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which also required Mexico to sell all of its northern territories to that of the United States. And a little fun fact, there was also a point in the war where the United States discussed annexing all of Mexico, but it was pushed aside due to the political and cultural differences between the two nations. During the split away of the Confederate States before the American Civil War, French ruler Napoleon Bonaparte feared that the Confederate victory in the Civil War would lead to the demise of the French economic influence within Mexico. So France invaded Mexico and placed a pro-French puppet ruler. Even while in the Civil War of their own, the United States still protested France due to its violation of the Monroe Doctrine, which was an American policy of anti-European colonialism within the Americas. After the end of the American Civil War, the United States began to aid and arm Mexican liberals and rebels to overthrow its puppet ruler. France and its allies did eventually detract all their forces and leave Mexico with a defeat. This was a major turning point in Mexican-American relations, with the two showing massive amounts of improvement. Some would say that this is the point in the two's history where their alliance truly started. Afterwards, the two countries began to work with one another on improving trade routes and countering Apache raids that were affecting both sides of their borders. Want to use military force and force the Apache out of the land that we stole? Aha! Later on down the line in 1909, the first presidential summit between the two countries was made. The meetings between U.S. President William Taft and Mexican President Porfirio Diaz addressed topics such as the disputed territory of the Chamizal Strip and the U.S. investments within Mexico. Bilateral relations broke off once again in 1914 when the U.S. didn't recognize a new Mexican leader who came to power. Kinda because the truly elected leader, in which the U.S. supported, was assassinated. Yeah. During this period of struggle and divide, World War I was going on within Europe, and in efforts to divert American attention from Europe, Germany prompted Mexico to invade the U.S. with the famous Zimmerman telegraph. Hey Mexico, how about we make a deal? I'll provide you with all the weapons you need to invade the United States, and I promise you that you'll have all of your previous land back. Please, Mexico. Please. The message was intercepted by the British and then handed over to the United States. Mexico still, however, declined this proposition and ended up selling oil to the Allies during the war instead. Relations between the United States and Mexico were eventually re-established just a few months later in 1917. The Great Depression brought on many trade and economic problems to the two's relationship. However, oil remained the most profitable business between the two. As World War II came around, Mexico became a key ally to the United States. Mexico expressed sheer condolences for the U.S. following the Pearl Harbor attacks and eventually declared war on Japan itself. Mexico did send small amounts of troops to fight in the Pacific, but its main key to the Allied victory was its contribution to the American war machine. Mexico sold massive amounts of metals and oil to the U.S. for weapons manufacturing and sent hundreds of thousands of workers to work in these said factories. After the victory of World War II, both countries have experienced an economic boom, and Mexico also supported U.S. actions throughout the Cold War. The two countries also became founding members of the NATO-like military alliance of the Rio Treaty, a collective mutual defense pact of many countries in the Americas. Mexico did, however, leave the alliance in 2004 due to the fears of being dragged into another Iraq war. However, since World War II, relations between the two countries have been fairly well with a few hiccups here and there. Today, the two countries have massive amounts of trade and economic ties. The two are both members of NAFTA, a free trade agreement between the United States, Mexico, and Canada. Mexico is currently the largest importer of U.S. goods, and the U.S. is also the largest importer of Mexican goods, with the two trading nearly $700 billion worth of goods yearly. Even with such strong economic ties, there are still some minor issues. For example, the United States labeled Mexico as a watch list country due to Mexico's lack of enforcement on copyright and piracy laws. Hey Mexico, what's up?
Hey, what's up?
This game isn't even out yet. How in the world did he get it?
Don't care. Not my problem.
Now let's get into the touchy subject. Borders and border enforcement. Under the presidency of the current U.S. President, Donald Trump, he has made the topic of illegal immigration coming from and through Mexico one of his top priorities, which has caused a pretty tense relationship between him and current Mexican President Andrés Manuel López. The border of the two countries has roughly 15 million people living alongside it, with issues coming up surrounding the topics such as criminal enforcement, nature preservation, and most discussed, illegal immigration. Currently, around 52% of illegal immigrants within the United States are citizens from that of Mexico. But even with most illegals within the United States currently originating from Mexico, recent years have shown that a majority of illegal crossings in the U.S. are from other Central American countries, such as Guatemala and El Salvador, who pass through Mexico in order to reach the United States. So nowadays, the US and Mexico aren't truly butting heads over the citizens of Mexico, but rather Mexico's lack of security over its own Central American borders. Mexico is also a strong supporter of free trade, currently having more free trade agreements than any other country in the world. So not surprising, free trade with the US is one of Mexico's top international policies. But in the wakes of the current immigration crisis, the US has threatened to impose a 5% tariff tax on all Mexican goods if Mexico were to not cooperate on illegal immigration. This did lead to some Mexican cooperation with controlling immigration flow from Central America. So now let's look past the slight hiccups, and as of this video's upload, the two countries have had relations for 197 years, and the two have embassies within each other's capital cities. Even with the two countries recently having a tense relationship in regarding things such as immigration, the two countries are still extremely close to one another. They are both one of each other's top trading partners, they work together on many counter-narcotics operations, have free trade agreements, and have huge cultural and inter-civilian connections. So even if these two do get in a few arguments every now and then, they still love each other.
What is this?
Well, I'm building a wall right here because your foot kept getting on my side of the bed last night.
Are we seriously doing this right now?
Well, part of you is keep coming into my space and my land.
Oh, you mean the land that isn't yours that you stole to begin with?
Well, okay, well, you're stupid.
Oh, well, you're stupid.
You know what?
What?
Thank you guys for watching today's episode of the US Relations series. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below if you have any suggestions for us. And stay tuned for our next video, which will be on the US-Belarus relations. See you soon.